Morning, Kevin.
Hello,
Good
hi, Kevin.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Morning, good morning. Do we have a confirmation of quorum? Not yet?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chairman.
We do? Okay, thank you. Thank you. With confirmation of quorum, I'll call the meeting to order. Adoption of the public agenda.
I would
We
move
have,
that the agenda for the First Nations Relations Committee be adopted as presented.
thank you.
Second,
Moved by
Moglove.
Charlie, moved by, seconded by Moglove. Thank you. Any additions? Hearing none, I'll call a question. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. That moves us to adoption of previous minutes.
I would move that the minutes of the regular meeting of the First Nations Relations Committee held on April 27th, 22 be adopted.
Thank you, Director Cornfield. Do we have a
Second,
seconder?
Abram.
Thank you, Director Abram. Any discussion? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carried. Business arising from minutes. Hearing no business arising from minutes, can we move on to the chair's report? Staff's chair's report. I've got nothing to add right now. So staff reports. Our First Nations governance and relation. Oh, sorry.
I
Go
would
ahead.
move that the report from the Chief Administrative Officer be received.
Second,
Thank you.
Colburn.
Thank you, Director Colburn.
So,
Any
Mr.
discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
just, I think Tina has a presentation she's going to put up, but while she's doing that, maybe I'll just add a few words here. We, after our workshop that we had, well attended, I think everyone really thought there was a lot of quality material in there, great discussion. Tina did a great job of consolidating a lot of the information in there, and with this committee, I think we've had past success with, for lack of a better term, work plans. We've kind of worked our way through that and evolved the committee. And so what I thought was we'd try and put together a summary of what went on, the things that came out of their direction, that we received through the groups, some ideas, thoughts, some input from the First Nations, and see if we can work our way through this into developing a further work plan for the First Nations Relations Committee, and then take that into budgeting and resources. So our thought was to put the information together, see if we can inspire some discussion, and talk about next steps where we might take this and the First Nations Relations Committee moving on into 2023.
Thank you. Now I'll hand the floor over to Tina.
Thank you, CEO, to the chair. Good morning. So Dave has said a few things already, but this presentation is a summary of the 2.5-day session. And so after the presentation, we will have time for questions and discussion. So on May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, there was a First Nation Governance Relationship session held in the SRD boardroom. There was the SRD directors and senior management were invited, and we extended the invitation to other municipal elected officials and CAOs. The intention of the meeting was to finish the First Nation Relations Committee goals for 2021, implement training from the elected officials training plan, and have discussions about goals for 2022. The MC and facilitators and guest speakers are all highly respected in their own fields. The information that was shared is to build a foundation of knowledge and to help build better relationships with the 10 First Nations that are in the SRD. This information and discussions that were had is to guide in future planning. This will help to guide the board, committee, staff, and budgets with short, medium, and long-term planning. The first day started with a cedar brushing from Wee-Wai-Kum First Nation Hereditary Chief Elder James Cattell. And he is highly respected in the Kwakwaka'wakw community as an elder and culture keeper. And then this was followed by Merle Alexander and Leah George Wilson discussing DRIPA, DRIPA Action Plan, and Truth and Reconciliation. And then that set the tone for the next 2 days. The MC was Isla Brown. She's a member of the Heiltsuk and New Channel Nations and elected to the Heiltsuk Tribal Council. The facilitators were Dr. Pam Shaw, who is a 35 years of experience as a professional planner, Masters of Community Planning. Ashley Wright, who's a Comox First Nation member, treaty manager, almost a decade of experience, and Naz, who is the owner of 50th Parallel Public Relations, and she is a non-Indigenous and has a lot and many years experience of positive relationship building with First Nations communities. The guest speakers was, we had Merle Alexander, who is an Indigenous lawyer who spoke about UNDRIP, DRIPA Action Plan, and he has a lot of experience or sat on the panel creation of the DRIPA and the DRIPA Action Plan, same as Leah George Wilson, who is also an Indigenous lawyer and a lot of experience and spoke on truth and reconciliation. There was Russell Dyson, the CAO for the CVRD, and the previous CAO for the Alberni-Claycoot Regional District. And he spoke on his experience with the post-Minot Treaty to include 4 First Nation governments as full participating members, and his experience with Comox First Nation and building relationships and partnerships. Cynthia Blackstone spoke, and she's the CAO of Cayuga Chekloset, and she spoke with Kevin, Director Jules, on becoming part of the SRD in their experience. The participants were put into 3 groups, and those 3 groups were given 3 topics for discussion. The work group session, the participants, when they were put into their groups, were given the same 3 topics. And the notes were put together from all the groups, and the information was put into a list and emailed to all the attendees. The list is with the communications with First Nations, protocols and agreements, partnerships, and opportunities for reconciliation. Communications was another topic. That was broken down into resources that already exist, considerations when building effective relationships, and things to remember. Now, for the next topic of protocol agreements and partnerships, protocol agreements is usually signed between two parties, and like the regional district or local government with the First Nation. And it's a commitment, a meaningful discussion of a certain area, and it's a pretty high, it can be typically a high-level document, and then from there is usually an MOU or memorandum of understanding that outlines and describes a description of the roles and responsibilities between the two parties. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Typically, the agreement is signed by elected officials or councils of chiefs, and the work is done by staff. Ensure the agreements are being adhered to and reviewed from time to time to ensure nothing's being falling through the cracks. So there was, at the previous slide, there is at the staff level, we broke it down into what could be done at the staff level. That was notes gathered from the session, but some of these could be done both staff and or elected officials. Thank you. At the political level, elected to elected council or council of chiefs. These are some of the items that came out of the notes as well. What already exists and can use as a template and for research on a process, because of the various municipalities that attended this, it was the information that was gathered, and this is already exists. So for opportunities for reconciliation, this is what could be done right now within their own municipalities or organizations. So one of them was like hiring of new staff and newly elected officials and incorporate some training. And there were some ideas that came from that. Considerations to incorporate in an action plan. There were various action items that were pulled out that could be done as well. And individual things to remember is remember to ask the nation for clarification on questions after you have done the research, and just to never assume. I think the big takeaway from all the speakers over that time was there was no clear defined answers. It was all about asking questions and developing the relationships with individual First Nations, and there is no clear line that says this is what you do A, B, and C. It's going to be an individual journey on each relationship. And next steps is to discuss the workshop and outcomes to use to create short, medium, and long-term goals, and to finalize the First Nations Relationships Committee strategy and goals. I know my thoughts over those few days is it was apparent to see that everyone who attended was really engaged, and it was really positive, and just to keep that energy and that momentum. There was a lot of great work that came out of that, a lot of great ideas, and it'd be a great to keep that momentum going and building on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tina. Does anybody have any questions?
Again, I just, if I can, Mr. Chair, just to kind of
Yeah.
comment is, you can see, there's a lot that came out of the meetings, and without, firing off and coming up with a detailed work plan, there's a lot of things that we can extract out of there with, action items, policy, direction. And we just wanted to kind of inspire some conversation to see if we can, get a bit better a feel from the committee about how they'd like us to proceed, maybe what depth level, bring us what, what we have, and you can kind of dissect that. Because there's a lot we can pull out of the information that came out of that, and just wanted to get some feedback from the committee on what their thoughts were.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, this was definitely an amazing experience, and I definitely I took a lot away from it, because it was great to come into that environment and ask the questions that needed to be asked, and and anything that was on your mind that you felt needed to be addressed it was a good safe place for it. And I want to thank Tina for that amazing experience for all of us. Yes, Director Abram.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, thanks for the report, Tina. It's very good, very comprehensive. I just wanted to mention that, there's a number of things in there that are things that we've talked about for many years, about things like service agreements and contracts and protocols and all those kinds of things. And I've been working with the chief of the Weewakai at Cape Mudge about a couple of three issues, actually. One of them Dave brought up in our conversations about these, and I think they fit right into, proceeding next steps, I guess, for, it won't necessarily be a committee discussion, but it'll be an electoral area discussion with an individual First Nation. And the first one was one that after discussion, Dave had mentioned to me that there's been some roundtable work being done with both the Weewakai, on just meeting, on an occasional basis with councils. And the other two parts of it are, I've been having discussions on two issues that are major issues for our community, and one of them is even on our board meeting, and that's about applying for grant money for infrastructure projects, and one of them has to do with a water system. Well, the Cape Mudge Band has been sorely in need of a sewage system, which we priced out at a basic cost estimate from their engineer to be a very, very viable option for Cape Mudge to join the Kwathiaski Cove sewer system as a service agreement. And secondly, I came up with the idea of, we can't afford, nor can we find a grant that will give us enough money to put in a water system for the Kwathiaski Cove village plan area, which was put in place to try and densify Kwathiaski Cove. And that took a 3-year chunk of our time and has been hindered all along by VHA. Well, if we had a water system, which Cape Mudge Band has just spent a whole lot of money over the last couple of years building a beautiful water system with a immense capacity for storage. And so I talked with the chief about some sort of reciprocal agreement of water going one way and wastewater going the other way. Could be in the same ditch. So we're going to have that discussion further. He's going to take that to his council. So we're already working on some service agreements, I guess you would call them. And Dave, with Dave's help, we'll be working on some sort of roundtable discussion to talk about what we're doing, what they're doing, and just bring those out into the open for people to consider. So, I think this workshop has pointed out that those are some of the things that we should be doing to, fulfill our obligations under reconciliation and otherwise, just as neighbors. So I'm very pleased about that. So thanks very much for your time.
Mr. Chair, Director Cornfield has a comment.
All right, thank you. Director Cornfield, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I enjoyed, for the most part, the conference. Tina, in your presentation today, I noticed in one of the slides close to the end, it says every First Nation is a member of the SRD. Which right now we only have one, and others have been invited to participate as observers.
Not speaking for Tina, but I'm not sure she meant that literally as for the Local Government Act, or like a member within the SRD or a nation within the SRD, but I'll let Tina. But technically speaking, you're correct. KCFN is the only member on here, but we have obviously other First Nations within the boundaries of the SRD.
I believe that the intent is for, yes, KCFN is part of the SRD. I believe there's been discussions on the other ones, the other 9 First Nations, like an advisory, being at the table just for discussions and advice. And I believe that was part of what was on the list, is having them at the table in that form.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that, but if we're going to use this and it's going to be part of the record, and the record should be accurate to reflect that others can participate as advisory at their choice. The other comment was, it said under one of your opportunities slide, important to have a safe place for difficult discussions. And I think that's got to be two-way.
Definitely.
It's not just a safe place for Indigenous communities and Indigenous peoples, but we need to have discussions on things that are difficult for us. And one of the things was when I asked a question, does First Nations consider themselves Canadian? And the answer was no. They don't consider themselves Canadians. They're separate nations. And so that's a very difficult position and discussion with myself. At least it's a problem for me personally, because of everything I've worked and strived for over my entire life, and what my family has also strived for. But I think those type of discussions have to occur. And then I think part of it is cultural training for First Nations in the way our systems are and what we do. There needs to be an understanding of what we value in our culture. And there may be an easy example is the spit, and the Thai spit, and the Thai club, and fish is part of our culture too. And it's sort of getting that understanding that the ability to go and catch fish, it's part of our rights under the Charter. We have the right to feed our families from the land and say to the governing bodies. So I guess I think it's really important that that safe place for difficult discussions, we need to start dealing with that. We've got to get those difficult things taken care of first in order to move forward. And that's both sides. So that's my comment.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I believe that this workshop created that safe environment for both sides to ask the questions that were needed to be asked and wanted to be asked. It created a great environment for it, and you had the right people there to answer these questions. And I think it turned out amazing. I mean, uh, just to be part of it from the beginning to the end, starting out in the right way with the option of getting of going into the room and having a cedar brushing, which was an amazing experience as well. And uh, um, I don't know about your. I'm not sure what you mean about your everyone does have the right to feed their family. That's right. But I know from a First Nations perspective that we've fought and fought for our rights with the government to obtain what was rightfully ours before time, and it is something that's still being discussed to this day. I mean, it's still a lot that needs to be worked on and a lot that needs to be heard and said, and it's all through the reconciliation, which has been the word has been thrown around a lot, and I feel that these days there's more action behind the word, and we're starting to see that, and I think everyone coming together to build each other up is works way better than tearing anyone down, and I think that's the steps that we need to take. But thank you for your comments.
Could I make a question or comment, please, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I have both, I guess, really. No, nation or person is the same. So blanket statements about, nations not feeling as if they're Canadian. I think there was a possible explanation given there, and I don't think that that's the feeling of all. So I would caution against that. Moving forward, I'd really hope that we would consider asking some permissions. So as a work plan going forward, asking permissions about if there is any appetites for any protocol agreements to be held between the SRD and the various nations. And I think part of that protocol ask could also be if we could have permissions to see their comprehensive community plans and maybe have a review of those. I know that that's one of my big takeaways. I didn't even know that existed. I really should have, because we all have, our community planning. And so, but it was really enlightening that day. And has been a very thoughtful process for me since. So, coming from a good place, trying to build relationship, maybe there is a question to be asked of the nations, beginning with the ones who are within the SRD boundaries, about what the appetite is for protocol agreements, and if there is a want or a appetite to share their comprehensive community plans. I think that's a good maybe starting point to understand. In an exchange of information. So for instance, our areas and municipalities all have our own planning ways of planning and our our plans. So maybe there could be an exchange in a safe space, in a good space, and just see what the appetite is. So I'm kind of looking further on as action items that may come out of this. So that's my comment and my question is if that's the want to of the board to be reviewing those kinds of things so that we're better informed of plans they have that may impact everyone.
I think
Yes.
Director Abram may have new hand up or still hand up.
New hand.
Okay, thank you, Director Abram.
Thank you, Kevin. On Charlie's first comment about member, whether they're all members of the SRD, I think I'm not trying to put words in Tina's mouth, but I think the intent was to say that they are all inhabitants within the SRD, which they are. So that would probably be, a very simple way of rectifying that is to just say that they're inhabitants within the SRD, and it would be accurate. The second part of it is the part about Canadian, whether or not First Nations perceive themselves to be Canadians, and the answer was no. There needs to be some discussion then at the local, provincial, and federal levels because here on Quadra Island, every First Nation person is represented by this local government, this EA local government. I've had First Nations members on my advisory planning commission in the past. They participate in our elections. We don't participate in theirs, but they participate in ours, and that's at all three levels of government. So part of that criteria for being able to vote in any of those elections is that you are a Canadian citizen. So, that's something that I guess the three governments need to sort out with First Nations. What's their status? Because, that would basically eliminate the rights of First Nations peoples from voting in non-First Nations local government or other government elections. So, it's just a point to bring up that needs exploration, I think. Whether you think of yourselves as Canadians or not Canadians, it's in writing that you must be a Canadian to do that.
Thank you. And I think sorry.
I was just saying that's one of those hard discussion items.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're kind of delving a little too far into it because at the workshop, that was one person's perspective on how they feel. So I don't think that should be classified as all First Nations feel this way, because every individual has their own perspective on how they see themselves, and they might not identify as a Canadian, but they live in they're in Canada. They I don't know how to really explain it, but I know this isn't the perspective from all First Nations. That this was someone was, when this question was brought up, it was this person's own, and they clarified that at the meeting as well, is that it's their own oh, yes, Director Moglov.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that, Kevin.
Interesting conversation. I wasn't at the workshop. I was out of town, so I couldn't make it. But I think that what we should maybe focus on now is where do we go from here? I think in Tina's report, there was a page that itemized, I think the idea was various sort of topics, I think, to address or to learn more about. I think it started with the TRC and then UNDRIP, and then histories of the various First Nations. So I'm wondering, I think what staff are trying to get is that list A, comprehensive, and B, is it in sort of the right order? Staff can correct me if I'm wrong, is you're trying to get some feedback or some direction from this committee. Is that the direction we want to go? Is that sort of where where we're at with this report?
If I can, Mr. Chair, I think so. Like, we can certainly extract what we believe came out of the workshop and develop something. And I think what I was hoping for is either we get a more detailed line of sight or just some greater direction from the committee that says, yeah, there's a whole lot there. How about you break it down and get into the weeds and then bring us something comprehensive back that we can pick apart?
Right, that's how I'd like to see this go. I think I mean, again, I wasn't at the workshop, but it sounds like it was excellent and it was really food for thought. But the question then, where do we go from here? I liked that, I don't have it in front of me, obviously, but I remember the page that Tina showed, all the different topics. I thought it was really good. And I would love to see something more as fleshed out as to what that might look like and how we could move forward. I will say also, I think it was Director Davis mentioned at the last, I think it was, it is hard to commit to 3 days in a row for a workshop. It's very, I'm not sure how many were able to attend all three, but with everyone's busy schedule, it's very tough. So as we move forward, I would, hopefully would be able to do this, a day here and a day there. It'd be easier, I think, for directors to attend. So, Dave, I know we have a motion on the floor, or a subsequent motion might be something like that direct staff to prepare a further report on how to move forward with the itemized list on Tina's report on whatever page it was. Would that be sufficient?
Yeah, I think that would be direction we're looking for, and then, any other a high-level direction maybe that the committee does or doesn't want us to follow. But
okay,
again,
so at some point, maybe bring that page back on the screen so that directors can take a look at it and see if there's anything on it that A, shouldn't be on the list, or B, is not on the list, and C, is it in the right order?
We need to deal with the receipt motion first.
Yeah, absolutely, Charlie.
The discussion here is finished.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I totally get that. I'm just trying to
I,
bring that part to an end so we can move forward.
I just had one comment, if I can, Chair, that so that they're clear on my comments about being Canadian, was in the context is that we need that safe place for difficult discussions. And that was the whole purpose. Like, I did not feel completely comfortable, especially asking that question, but I felt compelled to ask it, which I did. But the answer that I received still doesn't make me feel comfortable. And that's all I was saying, is that was one example of having that difficult discussions and making, how can I put it? It's about dealing with difficult things, which is not the easiest for us to do. And so I think out of the discussion, or at least out of the workshop, if we move forward on a way to deal with those difficult discussions, whether it's First Nations issues or whether it's our issues as directors, I think that is an important step that we have to create an ongoing safe place for discussion, not just when we have a workshop.
Thank you, Director Cornfield. Just to clarify, the notes that were taken from the workshop are not my thoughts. These are the notes of the participants of the workshop that I just consolidated and put them into groupings. They're not my thoughts. It was the thoughts that came out of the discussions of the three groups that were consolidated, and then some of those are action items that they came up with, and those were pulled out as well. So no, they are not in any specific order. They're there. And again, it's a group of municipalities and various areas that have come together and had these discussions as well. And the intent is to use them for planning and have a discussion of how to move forward with the information that was gathered. And also, in regards to being Canadian, that was, I believe, one person's personal opinion. But so, and this is my opinion, is you have individuals that have their own thoughts, their own personal, they don't represent, if I say, they're not representing all Indigenous people or all First Nations, they are into their own thoughts. And then the government themselves say, I speak, that's my personal thought, but Comox might have a stand that they take that would be whatever their stand is. So I think it's someone's personal thoughts, but not as a bigger group. It was just someone's in their individual stand. And as for a safe place, I believe that the discussion that I overheard was being able to have a safe place to have these types of discussions, and about the fishing that you were discussing, to be able to have those, but be able to feel safe, like having those discussions with the people in the room, and being able to share your thoughts, and being able, everybody to share their thoughts and feel safe about it. So I believe that's what the safe place, so it's for both, everyone to share. Then for voting, we didn't get the right to vote till the 60s. And Indigenous people couldn't vote until the 1960s. And if you live on reserve, you still don't vote for local government, and you don't vote in ours, we don't vote in yours. I haven't voted in the local government in a very long time. CCPs, a lot of them have them on their websites already. They exist and they're on their websites, and their documents, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but usually free to be shared. I know for us, I'm just going to say for Comox, we used it almost like it was a community-driven document that we spent years creating with the community. So we used them as a strategy, and for chief and council would pick from there and use that to move forward, because that already had the community buy-in. That was already their thoughts, their drive. So those would be picked out of there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I see Director Davis with his hand up.
Sure. I just have a quick question. I just want to make sure that I'm looking at the same documents. Tina sent out a few days ago a list of action items that were derived from the meeting. Is that what we're discussing here, or is there additional materials? Because I don't have anything else.
No, you're correct. That's what we're talking about.
Okay, great. Thanks.
If I may, Chair.
Yes, yes.
I really appreciate the consolidation of the, thoughts of all of the people that were in attendance, and the follow-up that we received. I do think, though, Director Cornfield does have, a point, and that's why I spoke earlier about protocols, about ways to engage respectfully, what that looks like. So I would just reiterate that I think that, gauging the appetite of the nations here that are relevant to the SRD's, immediate area, I would be in favor of that as a starting point to gauge want, need, and protocol, how to put that together, and how we treat each other respectfully, and opportunity to have those hard conversations, and how that should be dealt with if that is a preference to be in camera in a workshop, however that looks. I think those are all considerations to have.
So, Mr. Chairman, not to close off conversation at all, but once the motion to receive has been voted on, I think, and you could, if you wish, entertain a subsequent motion to give direction if you wish.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So the
Move
motion
receipt.
would be, okay, moved receipt. Do we have a second?
Director Davis.
Yeah, Director Davis, thank you.
We already have a motion to receive. Just need to call a question.
Okay. Okay. Anyone against? Anyone opposed? Sorry. I'll call question. Motion carried. Subsequent, is that correct? And a subsequent motion?
And
I'll try one if you want. Or Dr. Cornfield, did you want to try?
no, I was gonna get you to try.
Okay, I'll move that the First Nations Committee direct staff that a report be prepared to outline a possible action plan with respect to the topics outlined in the SRD report. I'm referring to Tina's report.
I'll second
Is
that.
that sufficient? Sorry.
If I can, not to wordsmith too much, I generally don't. With respect to, I would say the First Nations Government Workshop.
Thank you.
So with respect.
Outline.
Okay, I'm still seconding that.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. And so just so by way of information, I was looking for an email from Tina on this. I don't seem to have, I don't remember seeing it. I've checked a couple of different email accounts that I have, but anyway.
Was sent out on the 22nd.
Interesting. Okay, well, I've looked a couple times, but I'll look again. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, I think this is a really good way forward, and we can get a report on, how we can move forward on some of these topics, all of which are really are interesting and important. So I certainly look forward to that report.
Thank you for the wording. Any more discussion? And if none, then is any opposed?
Can I ask a question first, Chair? Sorry about that. I'm late, I know.
Yep, go ahead.
Could we have that in a comprehensive plan? Would that include, kind of short, long, medium term, the timeline as well with that? Which ones are, immediate that we can put into place, and et cetera?
Mr. Chair, if I may, yeah, absolutely, because I think our goal, and again, I think it's worked well in the First Nations Committee as we've worked off work plans, we've completed them, we've redeveloped them. So I think we're going to continue with that pattern if the committee allows us to, and that leads into budget and resources. So I think that is the plan, yes.
I would be in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we have the motion on the floor. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. All right, thank you. That brings us to our next item, which is correspondence, which is Klahoose Treaty First Nation.
I would
that
move
the
that
April,
the April
Oh.
26, 2022 correspondence from the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation regarding the status of the Clues First Nation treaty negotiations be received.
Second, Colburn.
Second.
thank you, Director. And I heard Director Colburn second. Yes.
And if I can speak to my motion, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I was disappointed, I guess, by the this correspondence that we received advising us that, they're holding off while they negotiate on property. As the SRD's representative to the treaty table or the Treaty Advisory Committee, there's been no meetings held with local government whatsoever, no invitations to any Treaty Advisory Committee, and I will be making a subsequent following receipt. I don't feel that this is acceptable. The process that was there, and we've had many meetings with MIR, Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation Ministry, to express our concerns. And I know that there is a number of concerns expressed to me by people over some of the stuff that's going on. So I find it disrespectful that we find out the state of treaties and their advancement as an afterthought. That, they're not going to finish at the time that they expected. Well, we didn't even know they were going to finish in the spring of 22. So my comments there.
Mr. Chair, just a little editorial on that I agree. It seems, certainly in the 7 years I've been here, we seem to go around in circles. And this is that, and I don't know if this is a COVID issue or not, but we have the ministry come and talk to us and say, they talk about their meetings, and we say, well, we've never been invited. And so we have, this, that, the other reason, we'll get on that. We have appointees to these committees. They either don't meet or they don't inform us of a meeting, and then we get correspondence of, something's happened. So I'm not sure what the solution is for it, but, this seems to happen consistently. So, when we receive the correspondence, I'm not really surprised. I have no idea if they're meeting or we're just not being invited.
Thank you.
I think
I see Director Abram with his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so there's going to be a subsequent motion. I appreciate that. I too was kind of shocked by this, and I just sort of assumed that our rep, being Charlie, would have been at the table. And I know from being on other treaty negotiation advisory tables that it is possible for the representative from local government to bring back to the board in camera the decisions that are made at that Treaty Advisory Committee. So my question was going to be for the next meeting, if that's not too late, for the next meeting, if we could schedule an in-camera portion that would alert us to the location of these parcels that they talk about that are going to be offered in the treaty process, because they're talking about, land from the province, money from the feds, how much and where. Those are the two questions. So if you could maybe note that for a future meeting, that would be great. And I'm sure that Charlie will be on top of it.
Well, if I may, one of the challenges that gonna give Director Cornfield issues is I don't think he's been invited or they've had a meeting, so it's difficult for him to report on something.
I realize that, but once we go through the next motion, I'm assuming that there's going to be a strong letter or motion to MIRR to let them know that we're concerned about the fact that we haven't had an invitation when there's obviously activity taking place. So once that's happened, then perhaps Director Cornfield will be at the next meeting. That's wishful thinking, of course.
Thank you, Director Abram. So we have a subsequent motion.
Mr. Chairman, you still have a motion to receive the correspondence on the floor?
Okay, a motion to receive.
Yes, it's currently on the floor, just awaiting a vote.
Okay, is there any against? Any opposed? All right, motion carried on to a subsequent. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I would move that the Strathcona Regional District and write to Ms. Jessica Jameson and Mr. Mark Price expressing major concern about the disrespectful treatment that we have received from Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. Period. And that treatment by MIRR to the elected local governments of the Strathcona Regional District. No, the local government is the SRD.
Could I interject something, Charlie? Could you maybe reference it? Can you maybe interject here? Just reference.
Just give Director Cornfield a second here. Yeah. I'm not sure he's completed his motion.
Period after that. And then under the community charter, the local government is considered a level of government. And we expect appropriate, respectful treatment. Period. And with copies to the Premier, Minister of Indigenous Relations, and Clahoose First Nation.
I will second that. Abram.
Thank you, Director Abram.
And I would also have a comment.
I have my hand up also.
Yes, I'll go Director Abram and then Director Davis. Thank you.
Okay, my comment would be to the mover. I totally agree with this, but it's just out there. It's not referencing the fact that it is talking about the Clahoose movement forward without this taking place. I think you need to reference that somehow in this motion. Could very well be just right at the beginning with reference to the information received regarding the Clahous negotiations, that the SRD right, blah, blah, blah.
I'll take that as a friend, as a friendly.
Thank you, Charlie.
I was just gonna make the same point, so my hand's down.
Director Abrams, speak again so I can capture what you're wanting to put in there.
Okay, that with reference to the movement, that would be right at the beginning. Okay. Yeah, that with reference, there's going to be two that's in there, so it doesn't matter. With reference to the movement at the Clahous Treaty Table, and then you can go on with the rest.
Thank you.
They can look up what the reference, you know, what the movement is. We don't have to spell it out for them.
Alrighty, thank you. So that was moved by Director Cornfield and seconded by Director Abram. Sorry, what was that?
I'm wondering if, I just don't see anybody else with their hands up on the screen right now, and I was just wondering if I could make a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
So regarding the disrespectful treatment, I also don't think this is specific enough. What was disrespectful about it? And I don't think that this is going to have much of an impact as a motion. Whereas if it were to say something about the disrespectful treatment that we have concerns with, I just don't. I think if it is a lack of communication, that we consider the lack of communication disrespectful treatment. I just don't see that it's tight enough for me to really support. I think that if there is if it's not being considered and not having the conversation and not be included, then that needs to be in there. That's just my comment.
If I could just speak to that, Mr. Chair.
I have my hand up.
Yep.
I can't see.
Yes, I got Director Moglove with her hand up.
Thank you. If I might, I'm just going to follow up on what Director Colburn said. Actually, my view is that the board member should not be writing this letter at the moment. I think staff should be writing the letter. They will then bring that draft letter back to the board, to the committee, and we can take a look. All the points raised by various directors on what it should or should not say, I think staff have figured it out. For instance, I would love the letter to reference the fact that we had a meeting, when it was, 6 months ago, whatever it was, where the person, whoever it was, I forget his name, specifically said, it's a new era, we're going to be consulting with you, and yes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the letter should be very pointed, very specific, but I don't think we should be writing it in as part of the motion. Motion should simply say that staff put together a letter to demonstrate our concern about the Clahous letter that we received with the lack of consultation and et cetera, et cetera. But staff can do that. That's not our job. So I think the motion goes too far, but as it stands right now, I'll support it just because I don't think we need to go on and on and on. Staff understand what we're trying to get at.
And Mr. Chair, just for clarity, I certainly hear the direction, and we can bring that draft letter back to the next committee meeting for review and approval.
Now, if I can just speak to that, my motion, I believe, said that the SRD right. Didn't say that directors were writing it, but I think it's important that you put the tone and the context to which it's there, which it's that disrespectful treatment. If they don't come back and ask why we thought it was disrespectful or what was disrespectful, then they're not very competent. We've spelt it out and spelt it out over many, many, many years. And we keep doing it. People come in and they say this, they say that, and we still don't make any progress whatsoever. And so the time to be specific again, just like every other letter we've written, is over. Now is time to get serious about it.
And if I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Director Abram.
Yes, I agree with Director Muglove, and I have total confidence in staff that they can write this letter and they can put a lot more detail into it. The only thing that I would change would be along the lines of what Director Colburn said, and that was disrespectful. Why? Disrespectful because of lack of involvement. That is the disrespect. We were not involved at all, period. And everything else in that motion speaks to that. So you just add those couple of words. If Charlie's in agreement, then staff have clear direction as to what it is we're talking about.
I think staff have clear direction already.
Mr. Chair, yeah, we're clear on what should be included in the letter, and we'll bring that draft back to the next committee. I think the motion as it stands is clear enough for us at this point.
Okay, alrighty.
Just one more quick point. Is there a timeliness issue here?
I don't believe there is. I mean, the note says that it's been put on hold, so there doesn't look like any timeliness issue. We can certainly bring the letter to the next committee meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'll call question. And
Motion on the screen first.
yes. Can we get the motion brought back up, please? It says with reference to the movement of the Clahoots Treaty Table that the SRD write to Miss Jessica Jameson and Mark Price expressing major concerns regarding the disrespectful treatment by mayor to the elected local government. Under the CC and LG is considered a level of government and we expect appropriate respectful treatment. Copies to the Premier, Indigenous Relations, and Clahoots First Nations. So I will call question on this, and are there any opposed? Thank you. Motion carried. On to our next item, which is the Uchuklassit Tribe Government Economic Strategy.
I'll make the motion that the April 28th news release from ICE-T regarding the support for the economic strategy for the Uchuklassit Tribe government be received.
Second, Cornfield.
Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion? Any opposed?
I think.
Yes, I had this, Mr. Chair.
It's Director Abram.
Sorry, but that's great that they were successful with ICE-T, but I cannot support, we have not supported in the past bottled water or bulk water endeavors in the SRD or the CVRD. And I would hope that we will not support them in this case. So as the drought situation worsens continent-wide, we would be foolish, I think, to sell out our most precious commodity. So I think there needs to be a caveat in that letter of support that says, pardon me?
There's no request for support. It's merely to receive the correspondence from ICE-T.
Okay, well then, I guess I would have to make a subsequent motion that we write back to ICE-T.
Okay, do you have a subsequent motion?
We're still on receipt.
Yeah, I'll wait till you're done with receipt.
Okay, alrighty. Any opposed? Motion carried for, and now under receipt. Director Abram.
Okay, thank you. I would like to move that the SRD inform the ICE-T board that although we have supported the the economic strategy that we just considered, that we do not favor bottled water or bulk water endeavors, since this is a word I'm looking forward to. This is a resource that we cannot afford. To I want to say waste, but it's not waste. It's just cannot afford to consider. That would be my motion.
I just wonder, Mr. Chair, this seems to be motion a little unprepared. Does the director want to make this as notice of motion?
No, I think that since this is already in motion, that it should go out as soon as possible. So that would be, 2 weeks from now, it'll go to the board and can then go to the ICE-T.
There's no seconder yet, so we can't speak to it.
Yes, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a seconder?
Seconder.
Sorry, who was that?
Kerr.
Okay, thank you, Director Kerr. All right, Director Moglov.
Thanks. So as far as I'm aware, the policy and the resolution from this board and other areas on Vancouver Island relates to bottled water from groundwater only. And staff could correct me if I'm wrong on that. That's number 1 point. Number 2 point, totally agree with our CEO that this should be done as a notice of motion. With all due respect to Director Abrams, in my opinion, a very poorly worded resolution and needs some thought before it gets sent out. So I can't support it as written, and I would want clarification from staff as to what is in fact the position of the SRD. My recollection, it's groundwater, not just generally speaking bottled water, but I could be wrong, just saying.
I got my mic turned on for a comment, Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
And I think I know what Director Abrams' concern is, and that's when it comes to the export of water, which is the main reason we were opposed to groundwater and surface water being bottled for export. But I don't know what level of First Nations, they weren't specific as to whether they're bottling 1 million bottles a day or 2 bottles a day. I think that it's part of reconciliation is for them to determine what they want to do with the resources on their land. And I would think, and I could support a resolution that said we were expressing concern about the export of water or whatever, but I don't know enough to support it about what they're doing. And I think that that is something that needs to be done before there was any motion made. So
I move that this be referred to our next First Nations Committee meeting.
second.
Thank you. There's just too much that we don't know, and it's just too premature to write any such letter. So that's why I'm making this motion to refer, and I would ask staff to provide a little bit of information for our next meeting so that we can have a reasonable and educated conversation about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have any opposed?
Yes. I have my hand up and so did Martin.
There's no debate on referral other than time and place and appropriateness of deferral.
Appropriateness. Thank you. On appropriateness?
Sorry, what was that?
I said on appropriateness?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say that it is inappropriate to refer it off for which would end up being at least a month. No, it would be at least 6 weeks before it would come back to the board. When it's happening now. And secondly, we want to talk about the difficult discussions safe space that we talked about earlier. Well, here it is. Is this a safe space? Because to deal with the water that is on First Nations land, water is a common resource, and nobody knows where the water is coming from. It could be anywhere on.
Point of order. Director Abram is not talking about the appropriateness anymore. He's going into the substance of the issue. The issue is timing. I grant you that, but that's all that the debate should be on the referral motion. Thank you.
If I can, Mr. Chair, the timing is appropriate right now. This is an announcement by ICE-T of a decision they have already made. We may choose to express concerns about future decisions they make, but putting this one off till the next meeting is not going to have any effect whatsoever on their decision, and I fully support, and that's why I seconded the deferral motion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think a general understanding of their treaty rights and what they have in their treaty which water is in the treaty. So I mean, it is something to look into. So
I think it would be appropriate to call a question, Mr. Chair.
yeah, call question. Any opposed? Or none? All right, carried. Thank you.
I'll move the next piece of correspondence, if I may, that the correspondence of the Wichita Family Life Society regarding National Indigenous People Day for 2020-22 be received.
Second, and I will have a subsequent motion.
Okay, thank you. Motion on the floor. Call question. Anyone opposed? And we have a subsequent as well.
Mr. Chair, I would move that the board of the Strathcona Regional District support National Indigenous Peoples Day of June 21, 2022, and provide a grant and aid to the Lekwitah Family Life Society in the amount of $500. Oh,
Second, Mogul.
yeah, June 21st of 2022. And provide a $500 grant and aid to the Lekwitah Family Life Society.
Thank you. That was seconded by
Second.
Director Moglov, I believe.
Yes, Director Moglov seconded.
And
Yes.
if I
Thank you.
can just speak to it, I think, and I'll leave it up to staff, but it would be nice to see participation by the organization on Indigenous Day, whether that's to have a booth and distributing some of the information and materials that we have got, but to have a visible presence at the, why can't I think of our square? Spirit
Square.
Yeah.
Here,
So, but I'll leave
Thank
that
you.
up to staff.
Yes, definitely. It was definitely something that I would partake in, except I have a something in our community going on that day in Cayuquit. Hearing no more discussion, I'll call question. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carried.
Could, Chair, I would beg your leniency for just a second. Could I introduce the late item under new business? And it's just happened in this meeting. It's about maybe being prepared and having some stuff written up for Edie so that we're not on the fly like this. And if you want me to do it as a notice of motion, I can do that.
Yes, please.
Okay, then
I'm not sure we need a motion, but happy to entertain an editorial comment.
Okay.
as an editorial comment, then I just, we do have these published, so it sounds like people, have made their notes and have these plans to make these motions. So just to make life a little easier on staff, either notice of motions or having them prepared in writing would be fantastic. I know how hard it is for her to catch up as I'm here in the room.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Director Moglov?
Couldn't agree more. We all get our agendas ahead of time. If you have a subsequent motion that you want to make, put it together, send it to staff. If you need help putting the motion together, that's what staff are for. Ask staff to help you write the motion. That way we don't spend all this time wordsmithing motions on the fly. And because sometimes what ends up happening is you don't even get the motion that you really expresses what you really want to get at. That's what staff are for, to help to move our agenda forward. So I couldn't agree more. It was when I first came back on the SRD back in 2018, we were very, what's the word? I think the chair wouldn't even allow subsequents or whatever unless it had been in writing. And I think we need to get back to that sense of proper governance. And I think we're sort of wandering all over the place. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by not being ready with our subsequents or motions we want to make. So yeah, I think we've lost our way a little bit on that, but I'm sure we can find our way back. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, and I agree. If protocols are need to be followed, then it would be nice to know them and understand them. Thank you. Director's reports.
and if I
Director Abram.
I have to make a comment on Director Moglov's comment. There were a number of directors today that did exactly what she said. Motions on the fly. Charlie did it, I did it, a number of people did it. And, first of all, you have to keep in mind, this is a committee. Committees are for discussion. Sometimes motions come out of discussion. They don't come out of being prepared. I was totally prepared. I have all of my notes right here on my laptop as to what I wanted to say. And I said them, and some things got amended by other people, changed by other people, whatever. And so then it is a motion on the fly. And that happens at all of our meetings. It's not an intentional thing where, oh, just out of the blue, I thought up a motion. It's a matter of discussion takes place at committee, decisions take place at boards, and during discussion, rightfully so, people can think up a motion, can amend a motion, can whatever. So, I think it's a good practice if we can do it. But when it does happen that there is a change to that procedure, I think it's totally legitimate. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And so I believe that moves us to
Motion to terminate.
termination. Do I have a
So
second there?
moved.
Second by
Seconded.
Director Abram.
Third.
I'll call a question. Any opposed? All right. Thank you. Thank you guys for the healthy discussions today, and I look forward to more meetings and seeing you guys in another half an hour.